Welcome to the Fundamentals of Production Advanced Lab Pleats video. This is the first of 3 pleat videos, and the supplies you're going to need are a marking tool of some kind. I highly recommend that you guys use a pencil, but I'm using a washable marker so that you can see the lines marked really well on camera. You're going to need pins, your ruler, of course you will also need your fabric, and then also your handout. So knife pleats are the building block of a lot of different types of pleats, and there is more than one way to do pleats. We're going to approach this as if a draper has given you a pattern and has just said, go pleat this. So here's the pattern right here in our handout. So you can either out of brown paper make this pattern so you can actually get practice of copying it from a paper pattern, or you can draw all of this on your piece of fabric. I did go ahead and do it on paper just so that I could show you guys what do knife pleats look like. Here's where we're headed. So knife pleats look like this. When they are folded, they lay like this in the fabric. If you've ever seen like plaid school girl uniform skirts, they're usually knife pleated all the way around. That is a knife pleat, is they lay like this, okay? So of course we're also going to do this in fabric instead of in paper, but this is where we are headed with our fabric. Okay, so I'm gonna set this aside and grab my fabric. And I'm gonna go ahead and mark all of my lines on the fabric instead of using the paper pattern to match up all of these marks. So I'm just gonna follow the handout right here. I'm gonna have to kind of set it aside off camera, but it is here and that is what I'm following. So before I actually draw any of these lines, I do want to draw in my seam allowance line. So just from this top edge up here, I'm gonna draw a 5/8 seam allowance. Okay, right there. Just right across the top. This is important because we are going to do some additional markings like arrows and whatnot, and we want that to be in the seam allowance line because we wouldn't want those markings to be on the main part of the fabric. Now, if we were doing this on real fabric that had a right side and a wrong side, all of these markings go on the wrong side. Okay, so the big thing to note is that on each side, the first block of lines is 1/2 inch wide. And then it alternates between 1 and 2 inches wide. So the first thing I'm gonna do both sides at my 1/2 inch so that I can just alternate back and forth, or not back and forth, so I can just alternate all the way across. So on this side, it is a 1/2 inch. And if all of our math has come out right, when I alternate the 1, 2, when we get to the 1/2 inch on the other side, it should line up perfectly. Okay, so I'm just gonna draw a line from top to bottom. That's 1/2 inch from the cut edge here. I'm gonna do the same thing on this side. Okay. There we go. Okay, so I've got pull this together so you can see. I got 1/2 inch on each side. So I'm gonna work from right to left because that just is the way my brain's working while recording this video. And so this first block is 1 inch wide. So from this line right here, I'm going to draw another line that is 1 inch over. So 1/2 inch, 1 inch. Then the next one, 1/2 inch, put this down, 1/2 inch, 1 inch. The next one is 2 inches. What's great about these blue rulers is they are 2 inches wide. So I'm just gonna line the ruler up right there and 2 inches. And I'm drawing these lines and I'm trying to make sure that they are really perfectly straight, going all the way up and down and across, because you don't want your pleats to be crooked or jagged because then they won't come out pretty. All right, so 2 inches and then 1 inch. Now we're ready for another 2 inch line. Get my fabric down a little. 1 inch. And we're just gonna keep going. Let's get down a little bit more. 2 inches, and then 1 inch. And then this last block ended up not being quite 2 inches. I will make sure for your handout, I think what I did when I first made these handouts, I did my numbers wrong and I didn't account for this 1/2 inch on the end because it's 1/2 inch and then doing the alternating. And then I got here and realized, oh, it's 2 inches there. I need another 1/2 inch there. It's okay for the purposes of this. So what I'm going to do just for this video is I'm going to actually X through this line because we're going to pretend this isn't here. And on yours, you will have an additional line right here that is 1/2 inch. Okay, so the next thing that we need to copy on from our pattern are these arrows that are in the 2 inches. We're going to pleat this direction, and all of these arrows land in the 2 inch square sections. So they go all the way across. I'm going to draw a line right across just in the seam allowance on the 2 inch block and do an arrow. This tells me what direction I'm pleating and what lines I am matching up. Okay. Remember, we are ignoring this line because I cut this out wrong. And this arrow is going to go all the way to the end here because you guys will have another 1/2 inch right there. Okay, so our pattern is on our fabric. Now, if we were doing this on a real garment or whatever, there are some other ways that we would prepare this. For now, we're just drawing lines. On a real thing, we would do thread tracing and then pleat from the right side of the fabric. But remember, the goal of this is just to be an introduction to different types of fabric manipulation. Okay, so the way these arrows work, I'm going to ignore this one for a second. This line needs to be pulled over to this line. And since we have pleated top to bottom, we just take that line and fold it over. I'm just going to temporarily pin this together so you can see where the fabric is going. And then we're going to jump over to the iron and properly move all of these lines over by pressing. So I'm just going to about 3 of these. But you can already see kind of how they are forming on the fabric. There's a bunch of different ways that you can use knife pleats. These ones were designed with no gap between the pleats. They are all butted right up against each other. They're kissing each other. But you can do knife pleats that have space between them. You can do like 3 pleats together and then a big gap and then another couple of pleats. So whatever design you want to do on your garments or that you come across in patterns, there's lots of different ways that they can be applied. But we're just doing 1 inch wide pleats that are right beside each other. And there's all kinds of math that goes into this. When I actually create pleats, I don't like using the math method first. I like doing it by hand, so I actually physically drape all of them. That's actually how I got this piece of paper. That's upside down. Is I draped them in paper and then measured and did all of the math from there. So here is where we are headed with our pleats. So that's what they look like on the top when they're all together. And what they look like, oops, see if I can pick them up. I didn't pin them in the bottom. That's what they look like on the bottom. Okay, so let's go over to the iron and properly press all of these pleats in and pin them down. So now we are ready to pleat these on the ironing board. So I'm just gonna follow my arrows and I'm gonna fold this one over, and I'm actually gonna fold it, this first one, all the way under. And I wanna make sure that I have this line exactly where I want it to. Just like that. I'm gonna press a crease right in there. My iron cord's caught on something. There we go. Okay, so I've got this lovely crease in there now, right on this first line. And I'm gonna pull this over to where my arrow is touching, which for me is gonna actually end up being the very edge of my muslin because I mismeasured. And I'm gonna press the whole thing flat, just like that. Okay, so now you should see this line right here, which is the next pleat. You can kind of see that thickness, right? The whole pleat lives right here in this little section that's 1 inch wide. So now before I move on, I want to pin this in place so it doesn't go anywhere. And And I'm going to pin the top and the bottom just because I find that on these samples, it's much easier to manipulate and carry back and forth between my ironing table, my sewing machine, and all of that when I've got both sides pinned. Okay, so now I'm going to fold this. I'm going to do it as one step. Pinch this right on my line. Make sure everything's lined up as perfectly and as straight as I can get it. Hold it in place with my fingers. And then press all of that down at once. Okay, just like that. And I'm using a lot of steam as I'm doing this so that everything is held into place nicely. And you want to make sure as you're pinning, you don't accidentally pull it out and then pin. Keep it right at where you have pressed it. Okay, so let's just keep pleating this all the way over. These are knife pleats. And knife pleats don't always go this direction. They can go really either way you want. This is just the way that feels comfortable to me. And I am pinning through all of my layers. Once I have this all pinned, I'm going to show you something very interesting about pleats, particularly knife pleats, is from the wrong side of the fabric, they look like they're going one direction. From the right side of the fabric, they're going to be looking. Okay, that's a weird phrasing. From the right side of the fabric, the pleats actually go the opposite direction. So these pleats are all facing that way. When we flip this over, they're now going, nope, they're going the same way. It's box pleats. Box pleats are the opposite. Whew. Y'all, can you tell that I've recorded this video when it's Tech Week? Or the end of Tech Week, we just opened a show. So, I get all that pressed. I go over the middle again. And then pin this in place. Okay. Now, you should have on yours an additional 1/2 inch over there. So this gives us a little bit of a gap there. All right, so there we go. Our pleats are all pinned into place, and then all we have to do is just stitch right on our stitch line with a machine-based stitch, and then your pleats are done. So I'm going to do that real quick and then pop back over here and show you what they look like finished. Okay, so now I have these all stitched, and if I were to kind of pull the bottom here, you can see how the knife pleats flare out and what they look like from the right side. And those are knife pleats. I'm going to give this one more press just to make it look nice and clean. And this is ready to go into your sample binder. There are knife pleats.